hope you can see my screen. Yeah, as you said, I'm going to talk a little bit about API client generation with these tools like DRF Spectacular and OpenAPI-TypeScript-Codegen. These are very long names and very specific tools. I saw that not everyone here has experience with Django. This DRF Spectacular is a tool that is specific to Django, and not only that, but specific to DRF, which is a library we use for creating REST APIs in Django. I'm not going to get that deep into this, but I can type the name of the tools if you want to know more about them in the chat later. Okay, so I hope that you can get the most important information. I'm not going to get too deep into technical stuff. It's more about like advantages, disadvantages, and like tips to use it the right way. So I think even the people that aren't like that experienced with Django will take advantage of this. Okay, so cool. My name is Hugo Bessa. As I said, I'm tech lead and partner at Vinta. I'm from Recife in Brazil. It's in the northeast region of Brazil. It's really hot here. Like it's like 30 Celsius. I don't know how much that means in Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, but it's pretty hot the whole year. It's pretty good, like to the climate here. So I'm graduated in computer science, and I use Django since version 1.6. It's been 10 years journey. When I started, it didn't even have migrations, so it was pretty hard to make database migrations that time. But like Django evolved pretty well in these 10 years. I really love using Django, and I'm going to start this talk talking about a bit of a treason I did with Django recently. I'm going to start the talk talking about Node.js and TypeScript. And why is that? Because like recently I've worked in trying to figure out what tools we had in Node.js and TypeScript that we didn't have in Django. I was trying to find out. I spent a couple of months researching about this. What I could do in Node.js and TypeScript that I couldn't do in Django, what advantages I could take in that environment that aren't available for Django. And like spoiler alert, the experience wasn't that good. I'm going to explain in detail what I figured out. So compare with Django, like Node.js and like the frameworks I've used, like I tested Nest.js, Next.js, and other smaller frameworks. And like the packages available by the community aren't that opinionated, aren't that plug and play. They can't like assume how you create your models or how you design your authentication system. That's something that Django does very well. It defines the right way of doing things. So basically, it's easy to create a community of plugins that you can just add to your application and it works out of without any effort. So the ORM maturity is not that great as well. Like the Django ORM is very well battle tested. Like there are many options in Next in Node.js, but they are not as mature as Django. Like testing may be really hard, especially with parallelization. Like Django does things like having different databases for each parallel test that's running. This is like built into Django framework. So it's really easy to make your test suite run really fast. And the last one is it's inside my heart. Like Django admin makes our lives really fast to kick things off. Like you from scratch have like a full-blown admin area with permissions and everything you need to manage your product. So this is kind of the bad part, but there are very good things too, like SSR, like they are doing a very good work with server-side rendering that makes like your application to be performatic in the same way, not make you lose your mind like managing server side and client side. So The infrastructure abstraction is very, very good. There are boilerplates for everything. Every tool that you want to combine with other tool, there's a boilerplate for that. So you can kick things off really easily, and it's really easy to extend the linter as well. So my experience wasn't only bad stuff. Like, I still think that Django is really great to use. It's the best option for me for web development, like analyzing, comparing with the things I tested in a Node. But there's one thing that I really loved about developing with Node.js and TypeScript is the integrated environment. This is like really great. Like, everything has types. I don't know what magic like people did in the JavaScript community that everything has types. The editor completes everything. Automated imports works like a charm. In any editor, you like do some minimal configuration. So integrated environment is really great. And the best thing is code generation is actually a thing. There are many packages that makes you go from like a model file or some configuration file, and it generates everything for you, like API clients, like GraphQL clients, like form validation. There are many things that can be generated from a single source of truth. And that kind of inspired me of looking for tools for doing the same thing for Django, because I thought that would be possible. So I found an actual like combination of tools that made the flow for work, like generating code for me, like in a way that is solid and it's easy to use. So that's before going to code generation itself, I'd like to talk about static typing here, because like TypeScript is there and there's types for everything, and Python also has type annotations. I think it's not as used as in the TypeScript community, but there are very solid packages that are already typed you can use in the community. So and like typing in Python is very powerful. There are things that you can do with Python types that you can't even do with TypeScript. And one example of this is like these libraries I've put in here, like Strawberry. This is a library for implementing GraphQL APIs. There's also Django virtual models. This is a library like actually someone in Vinta created. Is Flavio. He's going to talk after me. It's for avoiding N+1s. I don't know if you stumble at this problem. Like, web developers are very used to stumble at this, like N+1s somewhere, sometime in their careers. So it avoids N+1 in a sustainable way, and it uses your types for like generating things, and it uses it uses the type framework for doing things in a more integrated way. So the last one is DRF Spectacular, which is the focus here for generating OpenAPI schemas, right? Like OpenAPI schema is not only for that, but it's mostly used for doing what I'm going to show next, which is turning like code, like that's a function of DRF Spectacular actually, turning code like serializers. This is a way to convert like external data JSON into a Django object. And doing the opposite as well, turning Django object into a JSON. So by defining these things, the serializer and the view, using the serializer, you can generate a full-blown API documentation, right? So this is what DRF Spectacular is mostly used for generating documentation. But the way it does generate the documentation is by creating this schema file, or a schema. Actually, the schema is not necessarily a file, but generating this schema that is used by that is defined in the OpenAPI way, following some specs, and it can be used by other tools like Redoc or Swagger to show it as a documentation interface, like, right? So it basically gets the parameters you need. It shows the possible responses. It gives you examples. It generates things for you in a way it's easy for you to understand what these endpoints are for. So the main goal of DRF Spectacular is actually generating documentation. But we are going to use it for this other thing, generating a client API, API client, right? So the good thing about Django DRF Spectacular is it has a good happy path. So it does a very good job on picking the specs from serializers and views. So you just define your code as usual, and it infers the specs based on it. It usually works if you're not doing something very complex. There are some edge cases, of course, like if you're defining serializer method fields, if there are fields that are kind of like using multiple fields and processing them and returning a third value, for instance. DRF Spectacular uses your return type for generating the specs too. So it's integrated with Python's typing framework, and it can generate the schema based on it as well. And it's easy to extend. So it has tools, helpers for you to extend the documentation, extend the schema in different levels, right? You can override, for instance, the view and define a different serializer to be used in that function, in that specific view. But you can also override the serializer and define a different set of fields that are going to be returned in specific case. You can even override a serializer field and have it be overridden in all the serializers you have in your whole application. So DRF Spectacular it makes your schema generation streamlined. And that's the first step for us to ensure that we can generate the client, right? We extract the information of how our API works into a common format. And then we use other tool called OpenAPI-TypeScript-Codegen that picks the schema in the OpenAPI format and turns it and generates a full API client based on your schema. The client includes types for all your API resources, including enums, like if you define a choice field in Django, a char field that can have like a specific set of options. It's automatically converted to an enum in the front end, in the client. And it also defines the services for interacting with the API. So OpenAPI-TypeScript-Codegen, with a simple command, the command is the one that I'm showing you here. It makes a request to your API schema endpoint, and it picks all the whole schema and generates with some configuration. Of course, it generates the client based on it. So it helps you by doing like many things. Like it will avoid make you avoid dumb mistakes, right? Because everything's typed in the integration with your API, and your code editor is going to tell you if there's anything wrong, right? Because the environment for TypeScript is very well integrated with most code editors. So like you know upfront if you're doing something wrong with your API. Also, changes are automated. If you change something in your models or your serializers on your views, you just rerun the command and everything is generated again. And like your front end now knows what the right type to use to integrate with the backend. Also, mocking is easy. You don't need to mock your HTTP client, your like Fetch or Axios. You don't need to mock them. You can mock the generated services themselves. So the call order doesn't matter. If you're there, I saw many times in like looking in code, like people mocking the HTTP client and saying the first call will be for this endpoint and it will return this, and the second call will do this other endpoint. I've seen that this many times. It's not you can do it other ways as well, but it's very easy when you have the services for each endpoints you need to call. You can mock them and make them mock the response and make sure that you are mocking the right thing, not the whole client, right? Only the things that you need to mock. So there's also built-in authentication. So if you are generating a client, of course it will need like a token or a session or a cookie to communicate with a server. This is built-in on the OpenAPI, on the generated code. So it's very easy to do. I'll show an example in the next slides. Also, customization is possible. So one thing that makes me afraid about generated code is, what if I do changes to the generated code and I regenerate, these changes will be lost, right? So the way it works, if you can see here in the command, I say here that the request points to a file that is an API, a template file. So basically, you can define a template file that will be copied every time before the code is generated. So it uses your file instead of the default file. So if you need to make customizations, you can do it in the core of the API client, and it will use your file as a template to generate the code. So you can do changes in this file, and you won't need to work to mess with the generated code anytime. So the last one is you can use your favorite HTTP client. It supports using both fetch and Axios. So you can generate your API client and use Axios and make use of take advantage of interceptors and other tools that are made for Axios. For instance, the project I'm working right now, we didn't use the built-in authentication because we used Axios instead and used Axios interceptors instead to make the authentication process, because that would make retries work better. We prefer to do it this way. So it's possible to use everything you use on Axios that you have available on Axios. You can use with this generated API client as well. So that's it. This is an example of a generated file. All right. You can see here it generates like the basic types, like the ID is a string, status is an enum. This is also generated, this enum. I'll show the next slide. The requester is a user, and the method, which should be a message, actually, this is a typo. The message is a string as well. So this is how the enum is generated. This is like represents a choice field in the backend, right? If you define a model that is a char field with the choices attribute set to a defined list of values, it will generate automatically this sort of enums. Okay, so this is how to do the authentication. It basically it exposes this a global OpenAPI object that you can override the token attribute from it. It may be a string if in case you don't change your token is static. It's only a single token. You can just define it as a string, but you can also define it as a function. So in case you need to regenerate your token every time, or like following some cache policy, you can do it by defining this function on your front end. Okay, so you just override the global token attribute of the OpenAPI, and the authentication works out of the box, all batteries included. So this is how a service looks like, right? You can see it generates the names. The names are very verbose, so it always includes the resource name and the method you're calling. So here is a list method, right? And it has all the parameters that for filters, in case you use Django filters, it includes the parameters from Django filters as well, and it makes the query to the API URL and passes the parameters correctly. Okay, so and one good thing as well is that it turns the parameters into camel case. So if you are defining things on in Python style with snake case, it automatically converts it to camel case to look better in a JavaScript code. So it's a good call too. So the learnings I had in the path of like configuring this, first thing, named parameters, right? There's an option for you to use name parameters in this generation, in this code generation. It's not the default, so sometimes it makes use of ordering of the ordering of the parameters to generate the code. And that it's very flaky, right? If you do something wrong in the backend, if you change the order in the backend, it will affect the front end directly. So your components are not going to adjust the usage of the generated client. So the order is going to change and everything is going to break. So using named parameters, avoid this issue of like generating things and leaving things to break. Also, it's recommended to avoid stacking changes, right? As you're working with generated code, the generated code, it's like a lot of code. It's not like a very simple code. Many files are generated. And if you stack many changes and do them all at once and generate the code, the number of lines you're going to have to review is huge. So I don't recommend like spending too many time doing changes and then generating everything. Generate in a flow, commit as much as possible, so you can actually see the progress and see what are the changes done to the client, so you don't mess things up by mistake. Okay. There is also an issue with blanks and nulls on enums. So if you have enums on your application that use empty keys, like an empty key points to a value. This doesn't play very well with TypeScript because it's not possible to create an object in TypeScript with an empty key. So there are ways to override that and ignore blanks and nulls on the API, on the schema generation, on the DRF Spectacular. So there's an option to do that. So even if you run into this problem, it's very easy to solve with a single Django setting. DRF Spectacular also tries to reuse enums. So sometimes you're going to find that like multiple endpoints use very similar enums that has the same options. Like for Django, for DRF Spectacular, they will be the same. And that's not always wanted because sometimes these enums are going to change independently, right? And if you change them in the future, they will start to be considered different and it will break your whole front end because now there are two different ports for the generated enums. And a very important recommendation, always fix the schema, right? It's very easy for you to not notice that the change you did on your API broke the schema, has broke the schema. It's very easy. And because like you added a serializer method field without a type, or because you should have extended a view and you forgot, it's very easy to break. But you have to pay attention and always fix the schema as soon as possible because otherwise things are, it will start filling your types with any, right? With the any keyword. So anything can go in there. And this will make you lose the advantages of using TypeScript, right? So it's important for you to always check that the changes you're making are generating a correct client and a correct schema you can check this by looking at the documentation as well, because the client and the documentation uses the same source of truth. So if it's broken on the client, it's broken on the documentation too. Many times when I'm working only on the backend, I just consult the documentation that's generated by the schema to see if everything is being generated correctly. And then in the end, I'll generate the actual schema, the actual client, and it will work the same way the documentation works. So that's basically it, folks. I hope that you found interesting this combination of tools. I hope that you use it on your project. My flow of developing a web application has improved a lot by generating the API client, and I avoided a lot of dumb mistakes I could have done, like just by like typing the wrong attribute names or forgetting a slash somewhere. That really helped me to get things working faster as well. So that's basically it. I would like to open for questions. Thank you.